Welcome back to my channel. My name is Evelyn. I'm a grad student studying library science with a focus in youth services, and today I want to talk to you about my favorite young adult fairy tale retellings. So what do I mean when I say fairy tale? Well, chances are fairy tales are some of the earliest stories you ever encountered, but what exactly are they? Are they just folk tales? Well, folk tales are stories that have been passed down from generation to generation, developing over time through each retelling. And fairy tales are sort of like a branch on the folktale tree. They tend to focus on magical beings in imaginary lands. And folklorists like the Brothers Grimm and Charles Perrault are so well known for collecting these stories that came from an oral tradition that they are often mistaken as the authors of the stories, but that's not true. It's important to remember that there is no one author to any of these stories. However, there's always an exception to every rule, and there are some fairy tales that are considered literary fairy tales, and these were written by a single person. I've included a retelling of one literary fairy tale in this video, see if you can spot it. By breathing new life into these old stories, these 11 young adult authors are participating in a very long and storied tradition of retelling fairy tales. Alright, first up we have Ash by Melinda Low. After her father dies, leaving her in the care of a cruel stepmother, Ash finds solace in the fairy stories of her childhood. Then she meets mysterious fairy Shidane, who uses his power to make all of her wishes come true. But magic may come at a price in this dark reimagining of Cinderella. This book was first published in 2009, and it really blazed a trail for many of the others on this list because it was one of the first queer fairy tale retellings in the young adult space. Ash's main love interest in the book is another girl, and in 2009 that was pretty unheard of in the YA fantasy space. But that's not actually the main reason that I picked it for this list. I love this one for two reasons. One, it really focuses on the loss of the mother of its Cinderella character. Across cultures, tales from the Cinderella tale type really put an emphasis on the importance of the mother-daughter relationship and the loss of the mother-daughter relationship. And so I love how that theme is so deeply explored in Ash. And then I just love its take on the character of the fairy godmother. I'm very fascinated by the fairy godmother as a figure because she really only appears in Perrault's version of this tale and media that were directly inspired by it, like Walt Disney's Cinderella and Roger and Hammerstein's Cinderella. Low takes a very different approach to the fairy godmother figure, and her characterization of the fairies is a lot closer to that like dark fae court sort of thing that we've seen permeating YA. So if you are a fan of like The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, then I think you'll really enjoy this book as well. Next we have The Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder. After her ex ruthlessly betrayed her, bookish treasure hunter Fi no longer believes in love. When she pricks her finger on a bone spindle, she comes face to face with Briar Rose, the spirit of a prince who's been under a sleeping curse for the past 100 years. He believes that Fi is his true love, destined to wake him from the curse. See if you can spot elements from other fairy tales, like Little Red Riding Hood, woven into this adventurous Sleeping Beauty retelling. This is actually the first book in a trilogy. All 3 books are out now, and it was one of my favorite young adult fantasy series of the past few years. It's pitched as Sleeping Beauty meets Indiana Jones, so there's this like thread of adventure running through the whole thing, which I really love. Fi and her treasure hunting partner Shane have this wonderful relationship. They are going to these abandoned witch cities and looking for different artifacts, lost magical items, which is how they happen upon the bone spindle and get wrapped up in Briar Rose's story. Briar Rose is the prince of the fallen witch kingdom who is placed under this curse by another witch who is still out to get him and his powers, and so they have a lot to reckon with before all is said and done. Next we have The Frog Princess by E.D. Baker. This humorous retelling of the Frog Prince turns the familiar fairy tale on its head. Esmeralda may not be the prim and proper princess her mother wishes she was, but her kiss should still be enough to lift a curse off an enchanted prince. Except, instead of turning Prince Edric back into a human, Emma finds herself transformed into a frog. Now these two have to go on an adventure through the swamp to find a way to break the curse once and for all. This is the first book in E.D. Baker's Tales of the Frog Princess series, which was one of my favorite series growing up. I believe there's like 8 or 9 books total. That's including sequels and prequels, and they are all so humorous and fun. So if you're really looking for a series you can invest some time into, not too much time because the books are shorter, it's a little more of an early YA, then this is the perfect book for you. Next we have House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. In this fantasy horror reimagining of the 12 Dancing Princesses, Annalise suspects that the recent deaths of 4 of her sisters were no mere accident. The misfortune that has befallen her family may have something to do with the mysterious balls her sisters have been sneaking out every night to attend. Will she be able to uncover the darkness behind the facade before it claims her too? I first read this one when it released back in 2019, and I believe recently there's been a sequel or a companion novel published as well, House of Roots and Ruin. I have yet to pick that one up, but I genuinely enjoyed this one. If I had to pick one word to describe the atmosphere of this book, it would be haunting. Next we have Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. While other retellings of The Goose Girl focus on the titular character, a princess who has her identity stolen, Little Thieves focuses on the wicked maid who steals it. Vanya has spent the last year living a double life, using her guise as Princess and Giselle to steal riches from the nobility. When she snatches the wrong bauble, she finds herself with 2 weeks to figure out how to break a curse, avoid her upcoming wedding, all while being pursued by an annoyingly uptight junior detective. This is the first book in what I believe is set to be a trilogy. The second book, Painted Devils, is already out, and the third, Holy Terrors, comes out, I believe, sometime next spring? I may be wrong about that. Evelyn, put the release date in here somewhere. It is one of my favorite books, period. I love this series so much. Vanya is such an interesting narrator because she is so morally gray, but in a way that as you progress through the book and through the series, you really are able to come to understand. I think for a morally gray character to be well written, you need to have some level of understanding as to why they've developed a sense of right and wrong that runs so contrary sometimes to that of societies, and that is definitely true of Vanya. She's a very well developed character and just a very funny and amusing narrator. She's got a very strong voice, and there are moments in here that I love where she's telling you her story as if it is a fairy tale, and just some very beautiful writing, and I love that homage to the story that inspired the book as well. Next we have The Mirror Season by Anna Marie McLemore. Graciella's world is shattered after she and a boy she barely knows are sexually assaulted at the same party. She's lost her ability to make enchanted pan dulce, and she keeps finding shards of mirrored glass all around town. When the boy, Locke, comes back into her life with no memory of the party, Ciela knows that to keep them both safe, she'll have to keep what happened that night a secret. McLemore explores Ciela's journey of healing from trauma through the lens of The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. Obviously, this one comes with a content warning. There is discussion of and depiction of sexual assault. The characters are dealing with the aftermath of this incident throughout the story. It shades every aspect of this book. If that is a sensitive or triggering topic for you, I encourage you always, put your safety above all else and maybe just avoid this one. Honorary McLemore has many other wonderful books that are either fairy tale retellings or inspired by fairy tales. I will put some right here, right now. Some of those I've read and loved, others I have not yet gotten to. I think Honorary McLemore's writing style is wonderful and lyrical and unique, but it does take a lot out of me reading one of their books, and so I don't often pick them up. I think I've read maybe one a year since I started reading them, and this is still my favorite, which is why I did want to include it on the list. It's just a beautiful, touching, heartbreaking story inspired in part by the author's own personal experiences, and I cannot recommend it enough. Again, as long as you feel that you would be safe reading it. Next we have A Rush of Wings by Laura E. Weymouth. Rowena may possess a talent for the craft, but her recently deceased mother refused to teach her, insisting that she lacked proper discipline. One storm-tossed night, her mother returns from the dead, fundamentally changed, and in order to hide her new monstrous nature, she turns Rowena's brothers into swans. Rowena must learn to harness her power in order to save her family in this reimagining of the Six Swans. Laura E. Weymouth is one of my favorite underrated young adult fantasy authors, and similarly, The Six Swans is one of my favorite underrated fairy tales. So if you're unfamiliar with the tale, it's about a princess and her 6 brothers who've been turned into swans by their evil stepmother, and in order to save them, the princess must weave a shirt from nettle without speaking a word. Weymouth does include this impossible task in her narrative, although it is part of a wider magic system that's inspired, I believe, by Scottish folklore. I know that this book is set in a fantasy version of Scotland. All of Weymouth's books are inspired by different parts of the British Isles. Next we have Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. Maya's father was once a renowned tailor, but now she all but runs their struggling shop, dreaming of one day becoming a tailor in her own right. When her father receives a summons to court, Maya poses as his son to take his place in a competition to become the new imperial tailor. Lim expertly stitches together elements of donkey skin, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and the cowherd and the weaver girl in this stunning fantasy novel. So if you want the most bang for your buck when it comes to fairy tale inspired content, this one may be the way to go. Donkey Skin is a French tale collected by Charles Perrault that has a lot in common with his version of Cinderella, but a lot not in common. East of the Sun, West of the Moon is a Norwegian tale collected by Andrew Lang, and then The Cowherd and the Weaver is a Chinese myth that I was not actually familiar with until I started doing the research for this video. Next we have These Feathered Flames by Alexandra Overy. The twin heirs of Torin were separated at a young age in order to prepare for their respective roles in court, one as the future queen, the other set to take up the mantle of Firebird in order to maintain the balance of magic within the kingdom. The two are thrust back into each other's lives when the queen is killed by powerful magic, the price of the spell left unpaid. This is the first book in a duology, and its sequel, This Cursed Crown, is out now. The world building in this series is all inspired by Slavic folklore, the Firebird being a figure that appears across many different stories, but most famously Prince Ivan and the Firebird. And if you're like me and you love ballet, you'll also recognize the name Firebird from the Stravinsky Ballet. Next we have The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Adieh. In this retelling of 1001 Nights, the Caliph of Khorasan takes a new bride each night, only to strangle her by morning. Vowing to avenge the death of a dearest friend, Scheherazade volunteers to become his next bride, determined to stay alive until she can put an end to the murderous boy king. Night after night, as she enchants him with her storytelling ability, she begins to uncover the truth behind the monster. This is also the first book in a duology that was very, very popular when I was in high school, But since Renee Adieh has published so much more since then, I think it's sort of fallen out of the limelight, and I kind of want to bring it back. I might be rereading this one soon. Last, but certainly not least, we have Sleep Like Death by Kaylnn Bayron. Princess Eve has been training her entire life to battle the night. This mysterious sorcerer has the ability to grant anyone their heart's desire, but he always twists their words to turn their wish into something dark and terrible. Eve's own mother once fell victim to one of these twisted deals, and as her 17th birthday approaches, her other mother begins acting very strangely, locking herself in her room and seemingly talking to a mirror. So if you couldn't tell, this is Kaylnn Bayron's take on Snow White. It is set in the same universe as her very popular book Cinderella is Dead, which would have gone on this list had I not been trying to keep it to one book per tale. Although they're set in the same universe, you don't necessarily need to have read Cinderella is Dead to read and enjoy this one as well. This book released earlier this month as of the date that I'm filming this video, and I got my hands on it like a few days ago, hoping that I would finish it in time for filming, and I had no problem. I flew through this book. It's such an interesting and unique take on the fairy tale that inspired it, and I am kind of in awe of Kaylnn Bayron's mind, honestly. Alright, that's all that I have for y'all today. I'm always on the lookout for more fairy tale retellings to love, so if you have a favorite that I left out of this video, leave a comment down below telling me all about it. With that being said, my name is Evelyn. I'll be back next Monday with a new story time plan video. Until then, keep reading, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye!